energy, water, waste, food, sanitation, construction. These are all things that every human on Earth relies on, and we're still doing kind of version 1.0 technology for a lot of them.
So, software is eating the world, right? We've all heard this phrase by now. But today's guest has something important to add, which is that the world can't eat software. Pablos Holman is an inventor and an investor who's worked with Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, and more. He's kind of a mad scientist and loves to meet people who have crazy hair and drive a DeLorean. And on this episode, we're going to talk about things that sound like science fiction, but that Pablos says are coming soon. Things like solar panels in space that can beam clean energy down to Earth, autonomous cargo ships blown by the wind across the ocean, and tiny nuclear reactors that can be buried a mile underground and power the world above. At Deep Future, Pablos is on a mission to solve the world's biggest problems, and he's hoping more people will make the jump that he did, from software to hardware and into deep tech.
They're iterating in software, they're testing in software, they're crashing in software. So to me, all the people who've been building software their entire career, those are the ones who are going to save the world.
Welcome to Crafted, a show about great products and the people who make them. I'm Dan Blumberg, I'm a product and growth leader, and on Crafted, I'm here to bring you stories of founders, makers, and innovators that reveal how they build game-changing products and how you can too. You founded Deep Future to invest in what you call deep tech. Tell us more about what you mean by deep tech.
So we think we live in a world full of technology, but the truth is it's mostly a world full of software. So in our lifetime, or at least in our careers over the last 25 years, almost all of the technology being made and developed and worked on is just software. It's just apply software to more industries. And I think that's important to do. And it's been great that it has been done. I love all of it, but we systematized that. We co-opted the machinery of venture capital. Venture capital is called venture capital because there's supposed to be some Shackleton in it. You're supposed to be going after something new and that might be life-threatening. So you might say, okay, we're making Zoom, we're making Slack, we're making Snapchat or whatever. Okay, cool. We're making Uber. We got this thing with an air mattress. We've got these things going, but they're applying, all of them are applying software to a new use case. And that's awesome. I love all these products. They're great. They're, useful in their way. But we call that tech. And we call it tech just because there's a computer involved, So it's kind of disingenuous, I think. We should call that like software capital. I call it shallow tech because I'm trying to make it very clear that we're missing out on so many other technologies that we've been neglecting to work on, so many other industries, so many other problems that you won't solve just with software. So that's fine. Again, love the SaaS holes. We need them to go make all the software. That's cool. But we shouldn't call it venture. And we shouldn't kid ourselves and call it tech. Like, this is not technology. What is technology is new advancements that we can apply to go after old problems, And in my mind, deep tech is giving us a chance to go after the big problems, energy, water, waste, food, sanitation, construction. These are all things that every human on Earth relies on. And we're still doing kind of version 1.0 technology for a lot of them. And so you won't solve them with software. Yeah, you can do monitoring and you can do better, grid optimization and blah, blah, blah with software. But, a superconductor would be really nice for grid optimization. A nuclear reactor would be really nice for energy production. There are a lot of these things that we can try and advance into the world to make a bigger difference. So that's what deep tech's about. And I think a lot of people who are working on software would love to do it. And beyond that, I think they're the ones we need to do it. So, it's going to be an exciting time right now, if you work in software, if you work in technology, if you work in making new things, now is the time when we get to go after much cooler stuff than you can do with just an iPhone app.
Your LinkedIn bio starts with, I'm good at doing new things with technology that have never been done before. And first of all, that's very cool. And second, how did you come along that path to becoming an inventor?
It started with my very unusual childhood. I grew up in Alaska, and it's, like a different country or a different planet almost. Everything is different. People are different. And the reason that it sort of worked out for me is that I got one of the first computers that Apple ever made. And in Alaska, nothing else was competing for my attention. And so I just spent my entire childhood playing with this computer. And an interesting time to learn about computers because you could only learn by kind of reverse engineering, or at least I could. There was nobody around who knew more than me. And so I had to just try things. And I just would crash it and reboot it, is how I learned how computers work. But I just had this, it gave you this sense of possibility. It still felt like, someday it's going to have more memory and it'll be faster and it'll actually be useful. And so I knew a lot about computers from the beginning. And then that really turned out to be like the first superpower that I felt like I had. I felt like I could go anywhere, take a computer and make things better for people.
And so you've been hacking things and inventing things, and you've helped people invent lasers that shoot mosquitoes out of the sky. I mean, what are some of the inventions or innovations that you're most proud of?
Because I got to do so much with computers in the 80s, and then in the 90s, we were building the internet and all the technologies around that. I kind of got it out of my system, the building computers and building software and building, all those kinds of things. I wanted to take the computers and use them to advance other technologies.
In 2001, Pablos helped Jeff Bezos get his spaceship company, Blue Origin, off the ground with a lab that explored all sorts of out-of-this-world possibilities.
So the innovation at Blue Origin and at SpaceX was that, okay, what if we could make the rockets reusable so they, we destroy the fuel, but we don't destroy the whole rocket. We fly it, comes back, refuel it, and go like an airplane. That would make sense. And Space Shuttle was kind of like a low budget version, not low budget, but a version of that. They destroy all the boosters, so they essentially destroy the rockets, but they keep the shuttle itself. So that was kind of like a slightly better. But yeah, what SpaceX and Blue are doing now is the best possible way of doing rockets, you could say. They go up, they deploy whatever they're doing, they come back down, and we reuse them. So that has brought the cost down dramatically. There's still economies of scale. The bigger the rocket, the better, which is why you see Starship being a big deal for SpaceX. If they get Starship really working the way they have with their smaller rockets, it's going to be amazing. It'll get the cost of launch down significantly. And when you get the cost down, you open up a lot of possibilities for what you could do in space. And this is really Jeff's sort of description of this was always using the internet as an example. The government had to spend a lot of money to develop the technologies, to build the internet, to make the infrastructure for it, all that. All of that was done before on the day that Amazon was started as a company, right? And Amazon got to live on top of that. Facebook gets to live on iPhone and all the investment that went into that. And every iPhone app does. There's a lot of infrastructure that has to be built, a lot of actual technology that has to be created before the rest of us get to play on top and make icing on a cake. So what Jeff wanted to do was build the highway to space. Just make it possible for the next generation of entrepreneurs. We'll all be old and dead, but the next generation of entrepreneurs could start building in space. And there's so many things you could do. A multitude of them are useful for Earth. And a great deal of what we do in space right now is, imaging, communications. It's satellites that are trying to help take care of Earth in some sense. And that's really important. It's a way to make Earth better. It's a way to make life on Earth better. Even a lot of the things that maybe a Luddite would care about right now, like, what's happening with rainforests, what's happening with mining, what's happening with carbon emissions or methane emissions. That's the only reason we know about that stuff is because we can watch it from space, right? So these are very important advancements for the toolkit for humans for taking care of Earth. Beyond that, look, in the best case scenario, Earth is going to melt into the sun. So this is all going to be over. And that might take millions of years, which is a good thing we have some lead time. But we might want to start working on a plan B or a planet B at some point. And so, Jeff's vision is trillions of humans thriving in space, which sounds crazy, I know, but that's like space colonies going off in every direction. And it sounds wild, but we can do that. And it's going to take thousands of years probably, but we could totally start a journey like that with one small step. And that is where we're at.
In 2007, a different billionaire, Bill Gates, and the former CTO of Microsoft, Nathan Neervelt, asked Pablos to spin up a new kind of lab called intellectual ventures.
What we were doing was trying to invent new technologies on a large scale, not computers, everything else, what we now call deep tech, the things that you can do with advanced physics or new areas in science or materials and things like that. So at that lab, we didn't do anything but invention, and we got about 6,000 patents on our own inventions there. And so it was a prolific operation, very unusual in some sense, because there isn't a lot of places where you can, get a job where your title is inventor.
Yeah.
And it's just not like a legitimate career choice. So I'm one of the few people who's had the good fortune of being able to work as an inventor and just focus on that. And I think it's very important. There's a lot of people working on scientific research, which is really discovery. How does the world work? And we have that in labs, primarily in university labs and things. And then we have a lot of people working on making products, entrepreneurship, making businesses and those things, deploying new technologies. But the invention is the messy part in the middle. That's where you take the output of basic research and ask yourself, does this change anything humans have ever done? Can we do it faster, cheaper, better? Maybe in a more humane way or a more efficient way. That's what invention is about. That's mapping the problems to the technologies that could solve them. And sometimes you get a match. And that's what invention is about in my mind. And so we really don't have a class of people who have that job.
Yeah. And so what are some of the ways that you created this culture of invention, whether at Blue Origin or at the lab? Like, what are some of the factors that need to, go right for you to have, great success with this?
You need a crazy billionaire with vision. That's one thing you need, in my experience anyway. That helped a lot. But we also started by rounding up very smart, interesting, unique people who I think of as, most of them were what we call T-shaped. T-shaped means you've gone deep in something. For me, it was computer hacking, but it could be physics or chemistry or whatever. You've gone deep in something, but you have a curiosity and an ability to communicate across disciplines and work on things that are out of your specialty. And that's so important because the failure modes are, on one side you have a failure mode which is like I-shaped. That's people who are only good at their thing. We unfortunately train a lot of people to be that way in the scientific community. You make a name for yourself as a scientist by being the world's leading expert in, a very narrowly defined thing where you have no competition. Right. So a lot of our structures don't lend themselves to invention because the inventions are at the borders of different areas in science and technology and problems. And then on the other failure mode is you got these people who are generalists, but they never went deep in anything. So the reason we're so prolific is we would get somebody with a problem, surround them with a nuclear physicist, a laser expert, a chemist, computer hacker. Collectively, we know the cutting edge in every area in science and technology. And so we could work together to find those inventions at the borders. That's why it works so well. And that's repeatable. Other people could do that. I think that they should do that. And it's sadly rare.
Well, one of my favorite questions to ask guests of Crafted is, what's something that sounds like science fiction, but that you think will be commonplace in the near future?
We have a lot of those as kind of what I specialize in. A lot of them tend to be kind of industrial technologies, so they get a little esoteric. I'll give you one that's like straight out of science fiction. I think it was a Russian came up with this idea a long time ago, but Isaac Asimov wrote about it in the 60s, which is taking solar farms like we have now, rolling them up, putting them in a starship, launching them to space. Because the two big problems with solar panels are clouds and nighttime. If you put the solar panel in space, it'll get sun 24 hours a day. It gets 8 times as much energy, and you can beam it down to Earth using radio waves. This sounds crazy, sounds like science fiction. The truth is the technology is not that hard. We have all the tech to do it. We have the ability to steer beams and form beams. That's all being done already in commercialization scenarios like Starlink or satellite communications, even in 5G. We have the ability to make solar panels cheap. We've already proven that. The only hard part of this has been launch cost. And launch cost, ironically, has crashed. So to make it very clear, like to put your MacBook in space on a space shuttle would have cost $20,000. Now, SpaceX does it all the time for $1,500. And their target for Starship, their big rocket, is 10. I think we'll have the first commercial array up in maybe 4 years.
Wow. That's like near term.
Exactly.
What are one or two more?
So we have these guys working on making cargo ships that are autonomous. So these ships need no crew, they need no fuel, and have no emissions. And the tech is, okay, well, sailing's been working for centuries, so not a lot of technical risk there. We know it works. But for some reason, this is an industry that is burning nasty bunker oil, like the grossest fuel you can get, optimized for carbon emissions. That's what we built the shipping industry for. Half of the ships in the ocean right now are moving fuel around. That's all they're doing. They're moving gas from one continent to another. That's
Right.
it. The other half are moving Happy Meal toys around. Right? And it's a $2 trillion industry where $5 out of $6 spent on a ship in its lifetime is burned as fuel. Well, we don't have a fuel cost. So there's a huge amount of potential to make this industry a lot cleaner, a lot cheaper, a lot more effective. And it's all technology that exists. We just need to do it. I don't think the shipping industry is going to get around to doing it, so we're doing it.
So these are two examples you've given me, both relate very deeply to energy. And I know you've spoken about how you these days see most everything through the lens of energy. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I think as an inventor, you kind of collect problems. I try to learn about all the big problems in the world. And what you find over time is that, like, a lot of the problems you want to solve, totally easy to solve if you have energy. If you have energy that's clean and cheap, that's better, and a lot of it. That's then like almost any problem can be solved. If you don't, then you struggle a lot. You end up putting the cart before the horse. A good example of that is recycling. Recycling in our lifetime has been focused on the cheapest crap on earth. Plastic bottles and cardboard, and we really don't have it working. We've spent a lot of time and money on it. We have done a lot of work to collect and separate these things out. Recycling for a lot of these things in practice meant we separate out your plastic and your cardboard because we're going to ship it back to China. That's what's happened. China doesn't want our garbage anymore. And so we're having trouble actually having to recycle it ourselves. And the truth is, for a lot of these things, you're burning more gas to recycle the plastic than if you had just made fresh plastic. So we're not being honest with ourselves about that. There are edge cases where it works, and some cases where it works better than others and all this. But the truth is, it would totally work if you had clean energy to use for the recycling, right? And, people imagine, okay, then let's put the recycling plant next to a solar farm and use clean electricity to recycle. Well, that sounds like it makes sense, but your recycling plant, let's say however much it costs, make up a number. This is a fake number. Let's say it costs, 20 million bucks. All right, now you've got a $20 million plant next to a solar farm, so it gets clean, cheap energy, but you can only run it, let's call it generously 12 hours a day. Well, in order for you to amortize the cost of a $20 million plant, you probably want to run it 24 hours a day. So what do? Now we'll build a coal plant next to the solar farm to run at night, or a natural gas plant or something like that, right? So these things don't add up very well. We have pipe dreams of making battery storage, and batteries have been getting better a few percent a year. We sort of imagine that at some point we'll be able to store enough energy to get through the night. Some people fantasize about storing energy from the summer to the winter. These are amazing ideas and dreams to have. I hope it works, but we're nowhere near being able to do any of those things. And we got to be honest with ourselves about that. So yeah, my view is that we really need to focus on baseload energy. It needs to be clean, needs to be cheap, needs to be safe, need a lot of it, because the other thing we're lying to ourselves about is demand. Energy demand is extreme. A lot of people aren't getting as much energy as they want or need. And the example I've been using is, if you add up how much energy an average person on Earth gets, it's about equivalent to your toaster. Like, if you just duct tape the button down on the toaster, run it 24 hours a day, that's how much energy an average Earthling gets. Americans, we get 10 toasters. So, yeah, we literally get 10 times the global average of energy, every American. To get that kind of average, 3 billion people live on less than one toaster. This is what inequality means on this planet, right? So if you want to make a big difference in the world, you should probably be trying to figure out, how do we solve energy inequality? How do you provide enough energy that everyone on Earth could have, maybe not an American's living standard, which we've proven is a little bit opulent, but at least the living standard of a European, or someone who's, not worried about dying of malaria. There's a lot of these things that map to energy. Clean water maps to energy, right? So I think it's really just job one. I know this is a long-winded answer, but fundamentally, you solve energy, you solve a lot of other problems for free. And so that's why it's not the only thing I do, but it's really a major focus.
Yeah. And apart from the solar panels in space, what are some other ways that we get there?
Years ago, at the Intellectual Ventures Lab, around 2007, we had been trying to figure out what to do about energy. And we thought we would try to invent better batteries, and we worked on that some. But if you just do some basic napkin math and add up demand, you realize pretty quickly that we're not going to get there with solar and wind and batteries. And so we started working on nuclear reactors. And some of the folks on our team had worked on reactors before, and there are these incredible reactor technologies that didn't get developed. And we worked on inventing new reactors that could use those technologies to make modern, safe nuclear reactors that are more efficient and better. And that was 2007. we're recording this at the end of 2024, and we still aren't allowed to build those reactors. And the reason is not that they're not better, not safer, none of that. They are incredible. They're basically nuclear waste recycling machines. They're powered by nuclear waste. And they also make a lot of energy. It's just a miraculous technology, but we have a problem because in the US, we regulated nuclear reactors into oblivion. We outlawed them. And this happened basically, right around the time you and I were born. There were movies like The Day After, which was like this huge mushroom cloud movie, and it just scared the shit out of people.
Yeah. Well,
and so we got
Homer
this,
Simpson works at a reactor.
Homer Simpson, yeah. The Simpsons have also probably not helped. They don't paint the reactor as a positive thing. And those glowing green rods you see in the Simpsons, the fuel rods, they're not glowing and they're not green, but they are radioactive. And so the problem is, this is a technology that we got scared of. People got scared of nuclear reactors. We conflated nuclear reactors with nuclear bombs. We outlawed the wrong one. And we're still not being honest with ourselves. If we had done it the other way around, you never would have heard of global warming. That's what's possible. And so we got on the wrong fork in history, and it's time to course correct. So I started looking at recently, what are other ways we could get this going? And one of the folks I found was a inventor who had come up with a new type of nuclear reactor design where the reactor fits in a manhole. It's that small. And it's buried a mile deep in a borehole. So we drill a hole a mile down, we drop the reactor down there. It's got 10 billion tons of rock between the reactor and anyone's backyard. It's unquestionably safe. Nothing can go wrong down there, but if it did, there'd be no radioactivity from it at the surface. But here's what's cool. The reason it's so important is this reactor is based on existing reactor technology. It's not a new technology, it's just a new design. And that's the kind of thing that the US is able to approve. And so we could be in a world very soon where we're really able to put clean, cheap energy anywhere on Earth. And that's, to me, the most important thing to solve. And it's a super exciting.
Nuclear's had quite a, if you're pro-nuclear, it's been quite a good month with Amazon and Google and Microsoft and all that, the hyperscalers realizing that they need power, not to help necessarily directly anyway, elevate the world's living standards, but because they just got to run these data centers. So there's been quite a lot of nuclear, enthusiasm just in the past month. I find it somewhat depressing that it took this inordinate new need for energy to make that happen. But what's your take on how AI fits into this narrative?
Yeah, it's quite ironic that it might be the hyperscalers that save humanity, because they need a shit ton of energy to power all the chips they bought from NVIDIA. But here's why it's going to play out now and it wouldn't before. So, for our lifetime, the biggest lobby was the oil industry. They probably mostly staffed Congress. Well, they're not the biggest industry anymore. And the biggest lobby is now the tech industry. And they have a lot to say about who gets to join Congress and who gets to make these laws. And so they need nuclear reactors. They've all woken up about that this year. Both Amazon and Microsoft had signed deals to get some what are called SMRs, small modular reactors, kind of like the one I described. Microsoft bought out 3 Mile Island's reactor to try and bring it back online. Amazon bought out a different reactor's capacity, I think it's a 600 megawatt reactor to build for data centers. So that's all really great. And if it helps to free up reactors and we can build them everywhere and get the cost down, it's going to be just a boon for humanity. I mean, there's literally nothing else that you could do to make the world better than to deploy nuclear reactors as fast as possible. And also, just to wrap that up, the other thing that happened a lot of people missed is Congress passed this huge bipartisan bill called Advance to push the NRC, which regulates nuclear in the US, to approve modern reactors. And so all the problems I described that we had may be getting much better. Not only the reactor that goes in the borehole that I described, that one, which is called deep fission, is a great design, but in some sense, it's a regulatory hack. It's a way to get something that could be approved quickly. Whereas the TerraPower reactor, the first one I described, that's powered by nuclear waste, that's something that is an advanced reactor, and it will need a lot of cooperation from the NRC to do something that they haven't done before. And so it's going to take longer. It has taken longer and probably will take longer, but it's very important to do that. If we build those kind of reactors, then all the stockpiles we have, nuclear waste laying around,
Yep.
left over from making bombs, that's not waste. It becomes fuel. And there's enough of that to power the world for centuries without even mining uranium. And so it's embarrassing that we don't use it. Like, we literally already mined the fuel. It's just sitting there, but we're not allowed to build the machines that use it. So that's got to change.
Wow. You think on AI, I know you're a big believer in rapid iteration. I'm sure that's one of the elements that made the lab so successful.
Yeah.
And this is an area where, software has huge advantages to hardware because you can test and learn much more quickly. You don't have to physically make stuff. But thanks to AI, it's getting a lot easier to test hardware via software.
Exactly.
And I'd love if you could chat about the implications of that.
Yeah. So this is what I think is the most important thing for people to understand who are working in technology or working in building stuff with software, is that the reason software is so powerful isn't because we're all so smart. It's because of rapid iteration, because that's what keeps you from having to be smart. You don't have to guess years in advance what's going to sell. You can test and iterate every day. That's the thing that software enabled. So what happened in Silicon Valley? Well, hardware is hard. That's why it's called hardware. So we don't do the hard stuff. We go do the soft, squishy, easy stuff. So, the rule of thumb has become that, hardware is like 10 times harder. If you want to go build a Fitbit or an Oura ring or, anything that requires hardware, nobody's going to invest in you because they think it's going to take you 10 times longer. It's going to be 10 times harder. And they're not wrong. It is harder. But what's happened that's changed is the computers have become so powerful and so advanced as tools that now we make models of everything. We can make models of the physical world. We make models. This is how we design computer chips. It's in software. This is how we design your iPhone. It's in software. It's how we design a Tesla, a rocket, a hypersonic, airplane. Everything, we design it in software. We test it in software. We crash it in software. We iterate on designs thousands of times before we ever build one. So we get to do, so a lot of that power of iteration that we use that made us so powerful in software, the reason software is eating the world is because of the rapid iteration. Well, the world can't eat software. So we have to go use these tools, aim it at bigger problems, and these tools are making it so powerful that we can now iterate in software until we know what the right thing to build is, and then we build one. And that is why deep tech is so much more possible to invest in, like I'm doing, to build, like hopefully you'll start doing now, because we have that toolkit so advanced, the computers are so advanced, we model everything in Newtonian physics. We've modeled everything in, electromagnetism almost. We've modeled all these things so we can design in software, and you see it over and over again. That's what's happening in materials discovery, drug discovery. It's happening, every day I see another startup that's like, oh, we're building a machine learning model to find out what's happening in the microbiome or what's happening in every neuron in your brain. We're applying that technology to everything. So the last thing I would say about all this is that, especially for your audience here, these are people who built stuff with software. They've had an idea, they've built it, shipped it, scaled it, sold it, maybe 2 or 3 times in one lifetime. That is such unique experience. It's so valuable. I don't think people understand how valuable they are. That experience didn't exist for anyone else in any other industry. If you work in any other industry, ones I mentioned, automotive, shipping, whatever, aerospace, most of the industry existed when you were born. You showed up at chapter 37. You weren't there for the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So the software people are the ones who have had the experience of building a new thing in one lifetime, the whole life cycle. And so when you look at when I'm saying deep tech, I'm not talking about a totally different class of people. I'm talking about software people. I want them to come build these things. What did Elon do at Tesla? Oh, hire software nerds and told them to build a car. He didn't hire anybody from Ford, right? What did he do at SpaceX? Hire software nerds, tell them to build a rocket. And it worked. So it's because they're operating in that modality. They're operating with a software toolkit modality. They're using GitHub to build a rocket. They're iterating in software. They're testing in software. They're crashing in software, like I described. So to me, all the people who've been building software their entire career, those are the ones who are going to save the world.
Pablos, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I enjoy peering into the future with you and hearing how you're actually building it, not just peering. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and look, I mean, if you have 1 or 2 of your listeners that need more of this kind of bullshit from me, the Deep Future podcast is there as well.
Yeah.
I basically just pick the brains of people who are smarter than me and try and ask a lot of dumb questions and learn about the problems and that exist in the world. I try to learn about the technologies that might help us solve them, and you might get something out of that too. So
that's Pablos Holman, and you can find a link to the Deep Future podcast in the show notes. I'm Dan Blumberg, and this is Crafted. Crafted is produced by Modern Product Minds, where my team and I can help you take a new product from 0 to 1 and beyond. Learn more at modernproductminds.com. And please subscribe to Crafted and sign up for the newsletter at crafted.fm. And if today's episode has you all fired up, and I hope it does, please share it with a friend and warm up their day.
Americans, we get 10 toasters.